Hello, everybody. Our project is the Churches of Venice and the Lagoon. My name is James Langley.
I'm Martino Albanese.
I'm John Dooley.
And I'm Melissa Polverari.
So, to start us off, there are 142 churches in Venice and the Lagoon. Now, what is a church? Well, a church can be defined as any space which was or currently is in use as a space of Christian worship. So this includes the wonderful church which we are in right now, San Cosmos and Damian, and it includes all of these churches on this map currently. Now, the Venice Project Center has a long history with studying churches, with work that goes back into 1999. And over these past 35 years, the Venice Project Center has covered a number of topics of the churches. This includes digitizing preservation information of the churches, mapping and doing condition assessments of the church floor artifacts, documenting the modern usage and public accessibility of the churches across Venice, and mapping those churches with all of those metadata into GIS and creating a database or repository of information. And one thing that came up year after year was the demonstrated need to create a comprehensive index of all of the altars within the churches of Venice and the Lagoon. Now, why are altars important? Well, altars contain famous and influential pieces of artwork all across Venice. They contain invaluable church relics, whether that be the bodies of saints or martyrs, or relics that are mentioned in the Bible by name. And they also include ties to community history through the patronage from wealthy patron families, scuole, or guilds that sponsored the creation of these altars. And our goal was to create a comprehensive index of all of that information because no such project had ever been done, not within the VPC, and actually not on the internet anywhere is there any comprehensive list of Venetian altars. Now, many churches do have multiple altars in addition to the focal point architecturally of the church, that being the high altar where the Eucharist is celebrated during Mass. There are also numbers of side altars on the sides of churches. And these are the places which patrician families and other scuole and guilds would practice Mass and have celebrations privately. And so they contain ties to the community of Venice, thus documenting them as well as the high altar was necessary for our project.
So now to briefly introduce our data that we collected, as James mentioned, there are 142 churches within Venice. We were able to reach and visit 135 of them. We were unable to visit 7 of them just due to time constraints. We were able to enter and document 72 of these churches, and in the end, we documented 518 altars. So what we looked for when we documented these altars, we looked at the patronage, who sponsored the altar, basically who paid to have the altar created. We looked at the artist who painted the art on and around the altar. Typically, it was either a painting or a statue. We looked at the dedication, what saint each altar was dedicated to. We looked at the relics on and around the altar, typically of a saint. And looked at the damages that we saw in and around the altars. So now let's briefly talk about the patrons that we saw and we recorded. So patrons, as I said, is all about who paid for the altar to be created. Firstly, we saw a lot of families that patroned altars, and we also saw scuola and guilds. We found 55 different families sponsoring altars throughout Venice. These were often wealthy patrician families and often would donate to these altars to display their wealth and power. The biggest and most influential families we found were the Morosini family, which we found 5 instances of, the Grimani family, the Giustiani family, and the Corner family. We also found 31 instances of scuola or guilds. As mentioned in the previous presentation, these scuola and guilds were often closely associated with these churches and would visit there quite often. And they would often donate to an altar to help venerate the saint that they're closely associated with, especially with their trade. Now, we found roughly 20% of the altars were dedicated to a scuola or a family. But we believe this number to be inaccurate because oftentimes churches did not have any information or material whatsoever about who actually created these altars. As you can see here, this is a floor plan of the Chiesa di San Rocco, actually made by a previous research team here at Serendipity. But most churches do not have any kind of physical map. So we believe that most churches should put together some sort of movement to add more physical maps like these, or maybe small brochures, or even, as seen in the Chiesa di Santa Maria della Salute, they have QR codes. Now, these QR codes could link to a church's personal page or to our Venepedia pages, which we're going to discuss later on.
So looking now at the artists that created the art for the altars, artists were often commissioned when altars were being built to paint or sculpt the altar pieces for the altar, and also to create the artwork that is usually seen around the altar itself. So we identified 238 different artists in the altars of Venice. The three most popular being Palma il Giovane, Tintoretto, and Veronese. Palma il Giovane was featured 40 times in these altars. Tintoretto was featured 27 times. Here we're talking specifically about Jacopo Tintoretto. His son Domenico also used the name Tintoretto, but we are specifically talking about the father here. And finally, Paolo Veronese was featured 13 times. Now, there are some other notable artists that, while not having as many pieces of artwork in the altars, are still notable. First is this statue that was donated by Donatello to one of the altars here in Venice. There are 4 paintings in altars by Bellini. There are quite a few by Tiziano. And finally, there are a handful by Palma il Vecchio. Moving on to the dedication of these altars, are frequently dedicated to saints, typically when they're sponsored by a family or a guild that is to the family's patron saint or to the patron saint of the profession that is sponsoring the altar. We found 128 different saints represented among 331 altars in the churches. The saint that was represented the most was the Virgin Mary at 87 altars. This makes a lot of sense as she's the mother of Jesus and is considered the most holy saint in the Catholic Church. The next we found was San Antonio, who was honored 29 times. This, again, makes a lot of sense because he's very geographically close to Venice, being the patron saint of Padua. And finally, San Giuseppe is honored 14 times, again, making a lot of sense. He's the adoptive father of Jesus and is the last member of the Holy Family.
Now, talking a little bit more about relics that we found inside of a lot of these altars. So a lot of Catholic saints and martyrs were actually buried within Venetian altars. Originally, a lot of these saints and martyrs were buried in the Middle East. And when Muslims began to take over this area, they made it their goal to destroy as many Catholic relics as possible because they felt that worshiping saints or protecting relics was a form of worshiping idols, which is prohibited in the Islamic faith. So Venetians would travel to the Middle East and do their best to recover many of these relics, and they would bury them inside of Venetian altars in order to better protect them and honor them. So we found a total of 62 altars among the 518 that contained relics. Now, a relic may be anything from a part of a body, bones, or a full body. We found 41 altars with a full body. We found 4 altars with a part of a body, and 5 altars with various bones of a saint or martyr. Some relics that we feel are worth mentioning: we found the arm of St. James, honored in Chiesa di San Giacomo di Rialto. The nail used on Jesus' feet during his crucifixion is actually in one of the side chapels in Chiesa di San Pantalone. The foot of St. Catherine is on display on one of the altars in Basilica di San Giovanni e Paolo. The tooth of San Pantaleon is also in Chiesa di San Pantalone. The blood of Jesus Christ is claimed to be in one of the altars in Basilica dei Frari. And half of the bones of St. Nicholas, or Santa Claus, is in the high altar in Chiesa di San Nicolo. Now, while studying a lot of these relics and exploring these altars, we found that there was a lack of security around many of them. There were no gates, no ropes, and little security cameras surrounding them. As you can see here, the arm of St. James the Apostle is completely unguarded in the church, making it very easy for someone to possibly damage or even steal relics or parts of altars. As you can see on the right here, there is a painting created by Bellini that was stolen from Chiesa della Madonna dell'Orto in 1993, and unfortunately this painting has yet to be recovered.
And now we're going to briefly discuss the damages that we saw. So the damages that we found often related to the inscriptions you would find around the altars or the paintings themselves. So often you would, as you can see right here, the inscriptions would be very worn out and very hard to read. Or, as you can see in the painting, it's very hard to distinguish what's actually going on because the colors are very faded. So we created a damage scale on a scale from 1 to 4 that was an attempt to quantify how bad the damage was. So first, we saw that about 40% had no visible damage and were, as we could see, as a perfect condition as could be. Then we saw slight damage. It was somewhat worn, and we felt that there could be a need for restoration in the future. Then we saw moderate damage, damage that we felt needed some expert or some other professional to look at to determine if restoration is needed sooner rather than later. And then major damage, which we felt was in extreme need of some sort of restoration needs as soon as possible. And now here's some examples of altars. Here's one with moderate damage. As you can see on the painting in the back, there are a lot of clear-cut lines going through the back. That's because it was painted on marble, and the marble, as it's begun to chip away, has began to erode the painting, and we feel that there is a great need to restore this. And another altar with major damage is this one in Chiesa di Santa Maria della Visitazione. So now, first off, we have the pillars on the left. As you can see, it is completely white on the bottoms, on both sides. They should be completely red. On the top right of the column, you can see a large crack going through the side. That can greatly damage the structural integrity of these altars. On the bottom, you can see this is meant to be a skull and crossbones. You cannot tell it's a skull and crossbones anymore. You can only see the bones. And on the back, we can see the tabernacle, which was there and is now almost completely destroyed. We feel this is one that is in major need of restoration as soon as possible.
So talking about the repository of where this data is going to go, as mentioned in previous presentations, the Venice Project Center has developed Venepedia as a Venice-style Wikipedia, and our goal is to take all of the information which we have described to you today and upload it into Venepedia. Now, this comes in a couple different forms. This comes in the form of making individual pages for all of the altars across Venice and its lagoon, uploading information relating to its artwork, who painted it, when did they paint it, and what is the name of the artwork. Uploading all of the relics that we have discovered into the pages for these altars, and also quantifying the damage on the individual pages themselves. In addition to making individual pages for each altar, we also wanted to create pages in general to generally describe what an altar is and their significance within the city of Venice. And this also includes creating some graphics like you see here on the left, talking about what an altar is and what its importance within the city of Venice is. We also wanted to design a custom user interface for people to interact with the data of churches and altars within the Venice and the lagoon. This would function similar to Google Maps, where a person could search for or look visually where the altars are within the city of Venice, click on a particular point within the map, and look at all of the information available about that altar. Now, recommendations for future research, particularly within the VPC, we talked about how churches looked at the church floors, and we are doing the church altars. However, there's an additional plethora of artwork located on the walls and ceilings, like you see in this church right here. All of that artwork is very vast inside Venice, and documenting it would create a full architectural and artistic profile of the church. And we recommend that future Venice Project Center groups look at these pieces of artwork and creating that full repository of information. Thank you very much, and we'll open it to questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Of the relics you observed, did you see anyone who was like waiting to be canonized, like someone who hadn't become a saint yet but was still being preserved, or no?
We did find the body of one bishop, I believe, who is blessed, not yet canonized as a saint, but on the way there.
Of all the churches you visited, which one did you feel needed the restoration as quickly as possible?
So there was one church in particular which was turned into a museum devoted to the life of Jesus. And while the exhibition of the life of Jesus Christ and the many exhibits that the church displayed were very beautiful. We noticed that the condition of the church itself was rather disregarded. There was garbage left all over and around the high altar of this church. And while it is very difficult to tell budding businesses such as this museum that they need a higher respect for, the architecture and history community of the church, it is still something that needs to be mentioned and brought up to these businesses that are using the church for undesignated church practices and using the space in a way that wasn't initially designed for that.
I have a question. Did you evaluate the possibility of having some of this information in Google Maps? Like when you go to the church and you're in the church in Google Maps and you click in there, what would you need to do to have that information available that way?
Oh, in Google Maps itself?
Yes.
I mean, we piece-wise, we had gone through a couple of the churches and uploaded photos that were like, if there was a church with absolutely no photos on Google Maps, we did personally take the liberty of uploading them ourselves. I myself am a local guide on Google Maps, and I had used that prior knowledge to help editing the opening hours of the churches if they were incorrectly listed online, if they weren't listed at all online, updating that information, or if the church was permanently closed, such as in the case of San Basso, I had to recommend that Google Maps personally put the temporarily closed icon on that church. It wasn't necessarily a part of this project, but it was something we all took the liberty to do going throughout our field work of visiting all of these churches.
Of all the churches that you visited, I know they're not all open for visitors 7 days a week. How many times did you have to go to Mass to check out a church altar?
So the way that we approached this issue is we actually dedicated one Sunday where we all split up and went to as many masses as possible because they didn't all occur at the same time. So there was one Sunday where I believe there were, I think 4 or 5 masses that were attended, and that was the only time we were able to access the church and access all of the altars. So we would go to Mass, and then either right before or right after Mass, we would take pictures of the altars.
Any other question? If no more questions, please thank the team.
A special thanks to Professors Nitsch and Vidali, Professor Carrera, and Serendipity for providing us this wonderful ex chiesa, and Ali Dagan for our technical liaison support, and Giovanni Di Stefano and Supernova Publishings. Thank you very much.